Okay, now the things that everybody knows about you. Your association with the tribe out of Detroit,
Yeah,
and
yeah. My mentors, I'm still honored to have done this project. Marcus Belgrave, Phil Randlin, Wendell Harrison, Doug Hammond, names that are absolutely legendary, and put together by a legendary producer, Mr. Carl Craig. And then they got together some of the great young Detroit musicians like Kareem Riggins on drums, who played with everybody from Oscar
outrageous.
Peterson to Common Sense to Lauren Hill to you name the name, producing for Lauren Hill.
That's common,
I
by the way.
mean, yeah, yeah, oh yeah. I knew him. I knew him from the beginning when he was Common
When he was
Sense.
Common Sense,
Yeah, and then
only musicians know stuff like this.
yeah, you see,
Yeah.
this is the inside stuff. You come to us for the inside. And Damon Warmack,
Another
treasure
bad
of
one.
Detroit,
Hmm.
bassist, just amazing. And yeah, we came up with some. We took their original stuff and redone it. And we took some of the music of the deceased Grandmaster of Detroit, Harold McKinney,
Harold McKinney.
and played some of his music.
Here, here.
I got a chance to meet the master, and it was a pleasure to play his music, as well as oh, we did so much great stuff, and we really we went on tour, and I got to say I saw 3 4 generations of Detroit at once, and that was one of the highlights of my career. Highlights, yeah.
Do you think, as I do, maybe disagree, Detroit spoke a musical language and later on a rhetorical language in the left, the political left, that was very unique in the United States, uh,
World.
in the world where, I mean,
Some this might be another cliche, but there's some kind of sociological evidence that when Thomas Edison and Henry Ford and these guys gathered in Detroit, that those ideas they brought technologically, allowing that kind of wealth and power to come into Detroit by having a policy of white, black, whatever, you know, being able to work and all that, setting a model for a lot of the world because at that time they had factories and ideas that were not anywhere else
on
building,
Earth.
yeah, on Earth, building machines on a level that made wars possible. I mean, like the planes, the tanks, the and complete innovation. So these people had something in them that the music that also came out alongside, and as a result of that, everything from that early folk blues and ragtime down to techno and hip hop stuff still going on today. You hear interface with technology and a handling of ideas that's so sleek and sophisticated. You don't hear any other city. You hear some of that in Chicago because it's close by. You get some of that, but Detroit has its own language of music, arts, philosophy, politics. I would even say mathematics because when you look at the architecture of the buildings that are there, even we have Rodin. We have Rodin
Yeah,
there.
there's
We
a
have
Rodin in front of the
Picasso's.
DIA.
We have Diego Rivera in there as a mural inside our
Albert
museum.
Kahn designed the Fisher Building, and
So,
blah blah blah.
I mean, these are not small. These are not small.
Well, it was
These
the
are
center of money
yeah, an
at one
idea
point.
at one point. So,
Yeah,
and you know what follows money? People.
and ideas have to be made manifest through finance. So at one point, and I remind myself of this all the time, by it being and something that Echo again reminded me of in his book Foucault's Pendulum about the navel of the
Of the
world,
world, yeah.
the umbilicus tertiaris, and it moves around.
Mm.
I mean, let's think, for instance, ancient history was in Persia at one time,
Yeah.
moved to Macedonia and Greek. It was
Mm-hmm.
in Mesopotamia, Babylon, and somehow to Egypt. But how did it get to Europe? This is the mystery.
Well, I love that book by Martin Bernal.
Bernal, yes,
You
the
know,
Black
who the
Athena.
Black Athena,
Yeah,
whose
yeah.
theory is that it was the colonization of Greece and other places by Africans that led to that mystery school knowledge being transmitted, which Plato wrote about. He was if you make Plato the greatest philosopher of the Greeks, you can't withhold his information saying that they got it all from the Africans, including African goddesses, and that the priests, told Salon that they were recording history when the Greeks were not even able to speak and had a language. They were recording history with the stars and things like that. So you can't take half the story and forget the other one. I'm sorry, People, you know about Atlantis, you need to know about the black goddess that made it all possible. That if you take part of that story and you really look at it, you need to do your research on what Atlantis is. It's not just if it's a myth, it's a myth. If it's not, and Plato knows what he's talking about, research the black goddess that made it all possible, and it's written about in his Timaeus.
Okay, back to Detroit.
Back to Detroit.
And the music that came from Detroit. We're both Detroiters now. I grew up on Motown. Well, actually, before that, you mentioned Hal McKinney, and I remember being in high school, and Hal McKinney would bring different people. He was a music educator in Detroit, very famous person. He was like an uncle to everybody, and we all loved him. Fantastic musician. He turned everybody on to the bridge between classical music and jazz. He was astute at describing these complexities played together. But he would do tours of the public schools in Detroit, and one day I remember him bringing Roy Brooks and Yusuf Lateef. So it was a trio with no bass. It was just the three of them. It changed my life. It changed how I looked at the world, actually.
Wow.
The guy with the funny hat and clothes on had this little instrument, which turned out to be an oboe.
The Chinese oboe.
Yeah, I mean, it was very nasally and
man,
everything.
He could play the blues on that thing.
Oh,
like,
my God.
Woo!
And Roy Brooks had a set of drums that he used an air hose to raise the tone of the drums. And he would put this thing in his mouth and he'd go... It was amazing.
Magical.
It was just amazing. It was witch doctors up there. You know, I mean, they burnt my hair. So, I mean, yes, Detroit as a fountain produced many, Tommy Flanagan,
but
the
it's
Jones Brothers.
But Jones, you know, somebody said they well, Paul Chambers and his cousin Doug Watkins and Ron Carter.
Ron Carter, the other younger one.
Rodney Whitaker.
Joe
Henderson. Kenny Burrell.
Henderson was Ohio.
No, he was Lima, Ohio.
But he right on the other side.
He got cut. Yeah, he cut it and got cut in Detroit.
Yeah.
With Junior, who he sounds like early, Junior Cook. They sound very similar in their early.
Yeah, the horn tone.
Yeah. In their approach.
So many people came out of Detroit.
Detroit is amazing.
I mean, it was sort of the antithesis to New Orleans.
Yeah.
In a way, you had these polar spots: New Orleans in the south, Detroit in the north, and the impossibility of producing such a thing under such constraints. Because let's not forget, even though we celebrate the music and the artistry that comes out of Detroit, the experience of these human beings was from repression. I mean, the police were totally racist in Detroit. There was such a foot on the neck of the black community. I don't even think there was a Hispanic community then. In this musical development era, say from post-war 46, 47, bebop era, all the way up till the 67 insurrection, which burned down over 2,000 buildings. And that's what everybody sees now in Europe and Asia and everything. They see a Detroit that's been depleted by the very banks that made it in the first place. So these musicians created a dense library of sound, style, language, articulation that people copied all over the world. It's in the real book, in the fake real book, and so on and so forth. These ideas came as a consequence of this Erfahrung, or this experience. So, I mean, sometimes the debate about the European identity in jazz, or the discussion of who invented jazz, where it comes from, who made the money. I mean, of course, it was New York that made the money, and the publishing companies, even all the way far back as J. Orr Morton and so on and so forth.
Before, I mean,
who published that music? Who made the money?
Exactly.
But back to Detroit, I mean, there was Motown, especially. And this was revolutionary because Berry Gordy was a genius to be able to produce these recordings that, from out of nowhere, became the standard for pop music. I mean, did you know that the Beatles sent Berry Gordy a demo and actually came to Detroit to get on the label?
No, I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah, it's true.
Didn't know that.
And he was like, nah, guys, come on.
They don't fit the sound. Even when they
No,
try
but
to.
I mean, it was more cultural.
Yeah, but
It's like you don't fit,
yeah,
guys. Look at
no,
you.
they don't
How you
have any.
gonna,
Okay, if they sounded, okay, I can see if they sounded like
Well,
Motown.
they could conceive of them doing
Yeah,
this music,
yeah,
which they did anyway. Song form, sounds,
yeah.
you know.
But like they did Money. You guys, this is the first Motown hit by Barrett Strong, and the way they do it is different because he goes like da 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 da. Baby, your love is such a thrill, but your love don't pay my bills. I need money. But they go, baby, your love is such a thrill,
Yeah.
and your love don't pay my bills. I
Well,
need very big difference.
they speak English. We speak Detroit, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay, so that's how that rolls.
We speak vernacular.
Well, for me, it's just Detroit. They ask you, "Are you from America?" No, I'm from Detroit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a difference.
Um, yeah. I mean, back to music education. What informs you in your developing years? How were you taught, and who were your teachers?
Well, the first and best teachers were my parents. Um, my mother had me young, and she was still performing music the whole time, and she was actually involved in musical groups. My grandmother had a musical group. I'm fourth generation musician, so. And the same thing with my father. My father was involved in my grandmother's musical group with my mother, and they actually made a record when they were 12, 13 years old. And that listening to that, in the womb, and then coming out and hearing rehearsals at my house, going to rehearsals with my parents, seeing concerts at church, and my mother being music director, my father being part of his male group and everything. Yeah, they just kind of bathed us in sound and made us very aware of sound. And then the radio was on quite often at home, I have to say. We played the radio like people play the TV these days. People turn on the TV when they get home and just leave it on, like to make noise. Well, we came home and we turned on the radio. But it wasn't the radio, it was records. My mother played religious music. We didn't listen to secular music that often. And we did when we traveled, but we didn't. We listened to religious music. So I heard a lot of gospel and stuff. And I heard blues and things like that when I got older. But it was mainly about religious based stuff. But inside of that is a whole universe, and I have to say that is a root of a lot of black music. Is that if it's born in the church and then it's matured outside of the church in different genres, art forms, and things like that. But a lot of our information is still kept alive and nurtured in the church. And then the youths get older, and then they develop these other things that is taken outside of the church, and it makes its own art forms. But it continues to bring up the young people somehow. And I think that's the power of Detroit is somehow the black church and the community that is surrounding church. I don't just mean Christian church, it could be a mosque, but community circles where people get together to keep old values alive. These kind of things have kept Detroit together and keep Detroit from disintegrating into just complete nothingness. When it was abandoned by the corporations, the people just didn't stop going. They decided to be aware of what they had, keep it going, form these circles. I remember the 80s growing up in Detroit when Detroit was going through a crack phase when a lot of things were getting burnt up, a lot of bad things were going on, and still there were programs and opportunities. And I was born in the 70s and I was a product of that, and still, I don't think that stopped me from getting where I had to go, I think all of that is spices that help you become who you are. Now we're here in Berlin, talking about a great city, and it will be great again because I heard about the new cars, the new electric car industry, a lot of new technology, a lot of new investment coming back to Detroit, and the old structure will be filled in with new things. The government is investing in it. It's going to be alive again, and it's going to do great things again.
Last thing, underground music.
Mm-hmm.
Detroit, does it have an underground now?
I don't, not living there, I get so little news. I really don't know what's happening in Detroit anymore, Like, I'm from there, but man, what's happening now? I don't know.
I think there is an underground, but that's the next time I come back. Thank you, Kelvin, and thank you, Musician Squatter. Bye bye.